responders will be overwhelmed and doing different things. So you may not necessarily get an immediate response. So that means we need to be able to prepare ourselves to respond in the case that nobody's going to respond for us. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. But it's possible that we'll have a disaster that could affect our community, could affect our neighborhood. And there are different ways to go about that. I like to think of how I would go about planning. And I always say it's prepare to prepare. Okay, so first of all, that just basically means I need to think about it. I need to think about what I'm going to do and what do I need as far as supplies, transportation, what are some of the limitations I may have myself. So in thinking about what I need to prepare, I need to think about the different types of situations that may occur in Pleasant Hill as far as a disaster. Now, the obvious one is an earthquake, where we could have an earthquake either felt on the northern end of the Hayward Fault or the Concord Green Valley Fault or the Mount Diablo Fault. There's a lot of different faults around that may affect us in Pleasant Hill. For the most part, we seem to think that Pleasant Hill should be pretty well safe, I guess, is a way of saying it, just because of the type of construction. Even though we have older areas of Pleasant Hill, we still have a lot of wood construction, which will maybe bend before it breaks versus masonry construction. So we've got earthquakes. We also could be affected by wildland fire. And that could come most likely with prevailing winds. Let's say it were to start over in Baroni's Regional Park area and start heading towards Pleasant Hill with the wind blowing it in that direction. It's a possibility, but it's also possible that we could have a wildland fire that starts in just some of the grassy areas. And depending on wind, like we're going to be getting today in the next few days, that could create a problem for us. But there's also a house fire. There could be a house fire and it spreads to adjoining houses in our neighborhood and could affect us. Now I want to tell you, since I live in Vacaville and we did have fires that affected us here, our house was safe. The fire got a block away, just got to the next block over when the fire department stopped it. So I can share a little as we get into this, a little bit of my experience and how I reacted. Here I am a CERT guy, right? But how did I react in my family to that fire as it was coming? So we have that. Having lived in Pleasant Hill through the 50s, we had a lot of flooding. We don't have much flooding anymore. The city has been very strict in keeping all the little creeks cleaned up, having the property owners keep those clean. We do have some low-lying areas, a little bit of Poets Corner over by I still want to call it Davila Vista Elementary, but it's Sequoia Elementary, Davila Vista when I went there. And also down closer to Contra Costa, some low-lying areas. So we could have possibly some flooding. Hazardous materials. So, we could possibly, there could be a tractor trailer that overturns on 680. They generally won't be going down any major thoroughfares. like Contra Costa Boulevard or Taylor Boulevard. But we could also have some hazardous materials in our homes. I'm going to turn the light up. Maybe you'll see me a little better. And one of the things that gets me all the time is household cleaning agents that we all have an area where we throw in all the cleaning stuff. And our major concern there has to do with ammonia, sudsy ammonia, let's say, and bleach. And if there were to be a spill and the two of them would come together, you would have a toxic gas. So we can't just think of having some kind of hazardous material and think of a tractor trailer or something like that going down the road and creating that problem. Next thing is an explosion. We could have an explosion. Down Contra Costa Boulevard, there is a major PG&E gas main line. We think of San Bruno and the fire there.
Wow.
We do have one of those mains that goes all the way down Contra Costa, coming from Pacheco on down and south of, I think where it crosses over is just about Monument and hooks up with another one coming in from Concord. So there is always that. Not too long ago, we had a leak in a gas main over by the middle school, Valley View. It was on Rose and Viking over in that area. And we had to do some evacuation there. And that was almost 2 years ago, I think now. So with that, or some kind of chemical, and we think of, okay, what kind of chemicals? Well, we could have with the refinery in Martinez, the refineries, excuse me, they could have something happen there and the wind could bring it down to Pleasant Hill. So anyhow, those are the things that we're probably going to run into most prominently, but I would say wildland fire and earthquake are probably number 1 and 2 that will be major things that will affect us. So the next thing in this prepare to prepare, once we've identified those types of things that could involve us, is to think about how we're going to respond. What do we need to do? And how they're going to affect us. So whether or not you need to evacuate, whether or not you need to shelter in place. Most likely, if there was something happening at one of the refineries, we would end up sheltering in place. But there's also another possibility on a shelter in place, a little bit different, but there could be something where the police department would ask us to shelter in place for something that they had going on. But the overall shelter in place, if we think about it with some kind of toxic material, we got a warning. What you should do, first of all, if you have any pets or anything outside, you ought to bring them in, children, grandchildren, bring them inside. And then we want to start thinking about sealing off the house. So what types of things, and I'll ask you, get a little participation in here so you don't just have to listen to me. So what types of things would you do to your house if you kind of wanted to seal it off?
Fireplace.
Yes.
Fireplace.
Okay, you want to close your damper?
Mm-hmm.
You know, possibly if you had some kind of plastic sheeting, maybe you'd want to tape that around as well. Anybody else?
I guess you need to know how to turn off your gas.
Okay, you could always turn off your gas. But again, we're sheltering in place from something that's already there. So a Okay, let me go through a few more things. What's recommended primarily is to find a room in your house that doesn't have any windows. And that might even be a hallway where you could shut the doors and be in that particular place.
There's a-
You know, if possible, we certainly would want you to turn off your heat or air conditioning so you don't have air circulating. I'm in a reasonably newer house here in Vacaville and have the option, just like in our cars, of bringing in outside air or just circulating air inside. But regardless of that, I would probably shut it down so I wouldn't have that air movement. If you're in an area that has registers, which I meant are the vents where the hot air or cold air come out of, I'd probably try to seal those. Maybe put towels underneath the doors. You know, tape off what you can. Not everybody's going to have a lot of material to be covering windows and all of that. So what we want to do is just to, if we have that type of emergency, try to find a place. Be sure, first of all, that you bring inside grandchildren, children, pets, and then wait. So that's one of the things for sheltering in place. But to get started, how would you know to shelter in place? Okay. And we have in Contra Costa, we have a community warning system. Okay. And I'm going to hold this up. I don't know if you'll be able to see it.
Mhm.
Community, let me get it to stop shaking. So you can sign up for this by going to cwsalerts.com, and that's the county site. And from there, you can select how you want to be notified. Okay. And so that's one of the ways, be it a shelter in place type of thing, or if there was some big drastic emergency, that's how the county would notify you. There's also, or this is not very tech savvy, is that coming in backwards?
No,
No.
it's fine.
Okay, I see it backwards. Okay, there's Nixle, nixle.com. And you can go to that. That's how a lot of the CERT members get notified by the police department when they're needed. And so nixle.com, and then you want to text your zip code to 888-777. And that you can go through, and they have different layers of information that you want to be notified of. Okay. And then lastly, one of the things that we use in CERT for notification, especially for updates of things going on where we may be affected or it may not be in our area, is KCBS radio at 7:40 a.m. And that is our preferred notification radio station. So,
Well, can you put that up again? The last
sure.
one with the
For
radio.
what part?
No,
all of
the
it?
lake radio one.
Okay, and then we
There,
have, I'm sorry,
wait,
Nixle,
here. No, higher.
that one, or just
Radio.
KCBS radio?
Here we are. It's okay. And it's 4. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And Gordon, I also signed up for PG&E.
And
Yeah.
PG&E has notifications too,
Right.
that they would, if they had some major event or getting ready for the shut-offs.
Yeah, I just got a notification from them with all the winds that are forecast for tonight.
And there's also, I know in our county, Solano County, put out notification for the burn areas to take a look at whether or not, with the rain we're going to have this week, whether or not there could be some flash flooding. So anyhow, okay. So let's get going again. So we've identified some of the areas, some of the type hazards or disaster emergency types of situations that may occur in Pleasant Hill. We talked about sheltering in place when that comes in. And of course, the next one is evacuating. What do we need to do if we need to evacuate? Well, before I get to that, let me back up. Shelter in place also, and I'll get into this in more detail as we go get into this presentation more, may mean that you're not going to be able to go out and go grocery shopping, right? And that type of thing. So you should also think about those things you have on hand. And when we get into putting together kits, I'll talk more about that if you're sheltering in place. But what about if you have to leave? Okay. I would, first of all, think if I had to leave, not only those things I might need to take with me, but where would I go? Okay, so you want to think about where you want to end up away from your work. So if it came into your neighborhood and said, you've got to leave, we got a fire coming, or there's an earthquake, and maybe your house is damaged, you don't want to be there, where would you go? What roads would you take? So you need to think about, from a transportation standpoint, your transportation, how you're going to get out of your neighborhood, get out of the community, as well as that end spot where you're going to end up. Okay, and that may be a friend, that lives further away. In my case, with the fires, I came home to Pleasant Hill and we stayed in a hotel here in Pleasant Hill, away from the fires, because we had Fairfield burning, parts of Vallejo burning, as well as Vacaville and on up towards Berryessa. And it was interesting when I was in the hotel. I met folks from out the Antioch way that came there because we had that side of Mount Diablo was also burning. So you never know, but it was a place to go. So now we're going to evacuate. Thought about where we're going to go. So basically, we've been notified to say that we have to leave, or our house is damaged and we have to leave. So we need to make a plan. Okay. How we're going to go about leaving. And there are 3 basic steps to preparedness. So one I look at is being informed, and that's notification. Secondly, make a plan. And thirdly, the preparation. Okay, so I've been notified, I have some communication, I know something's going on. I've made a plan on what I'm going to do. And then the third part again was what preparations or pre-preparations have I made that'll support me surviving, leaving, whatever it is I'm going to be doing. So in considering making a plan, first want to check your home and think about hazards. Okay, what types of hazards do you have in your home? Now that could be chemicals. A hazard could possibly be, because we all do this, put big platters or vases and things like that up above the refrigerator and the cabinet up there. That's heavy things up above that could fall down.
Did you see Marquita go in? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear that last comment. Okay, I'll go on. So we quite often do that type of thing. And those are things up above that could fall and hurt us, or if it's glass or ceramic.
You might want to ask people to mute so that they don't casual
Yeah,
stuff doesn't.
I thought we had
interfere.
most everybody muted here. So I could ask, yeah, if you would please mute, and then you can unmute when you want to talk. Okay. So those are things that could create hazards, either a falling hazard on us, or it could be that they fall and break and now we have glass or broken pottery or something like that within. So we do have some of those things. If you have any type of disability, okay, you need to take that into consideration. How am I going to, am I limited in how I'm going to be mobile to get out? Maybe that means, depending on the type of disability, that you have contact with a neighbor who may be home that's going to help you. Okay. I know I had a hip replaced a few years back, and initially I wasn't real mobile, and then I got mobile, but I wasn't moving quickly. So, you know, if I had obstacles or things to go around, with my walker, you know, it was a little bit of a hazard for me to get around and take the step down from the house down to get to the garage and that type of thing. So considerations you should think about. Also, you want to determine if you're going to leave, what are you going to take with you? What's important? Okay. And it's nice to pre-think that, prepare that. And there may be a whole lot of things that you would like to take with you, but a lot of that could depend upon notification. In the case of us with the fire here in Vacaville, I woke up about 5:30 in the morning and smelled smoke and looked out the window and saw it kind of hazy. Decided quickly to get dressed, and I went outside, saw neighbors across the street that were out there, and they were talking to a relative of theirs that lived out in one of the valleys in Vacaville, that had to already evacuate. And it was shortly after that, a member of the sheriff's department came through and told us to prepare to evacuate. And we did. I live in a house, my son and daughter-in-law sold their house. We sold our house in Pleasant Hill, and we bought this big 5-bedroom, 5-bath house in Vacaville. So I've got grandkids here, son and daughter. My son's mother-in-law lives with us, as well as my wife. So, and their dog. So it was just a matter of us having to pack up and get out. Vacaville PD came about 20 minutes later and said, time to leave. And so luckily we were all packed by then and were able to take off. But we had to go through what we were going to bring, what was important. You know, we all want to bring photos, you know, of our loved ones. We want to bring all kinds of things. I happen to have all of our important papers in a case that's on wheels. So I just wheeled it out to the car and threw it in. I knew that. My wife grabbed her jewelry box. For me, what I call a spit kit, but you know, toiletries, those types of things that we were going to need. And change of clothes. And I have what I call a go bag that I put together, and it's just for that, what I have in there, everything from changes of clothes and toilet papers to a hand crank radio, a hand crank flashlight, extra batteries and a flashlight. And because maybe I'm considered weird about this, I also have a pack of MREs or meals ready to eat. So grabbed that and off we went. But it still was that moment of, what do I need to bring? So it really does help to think about this in advance and maybe think of it in two ways. One, if I had time, what would I throw in the car for the truck to leave? And two, what if I just had short 15-minute notification? What am I going to bring? So that's basically it, as part of making that plan, thinking through that. Then again, most important for a lot of us, medications. You don't want to, if you're taking some kind of medication, you don't want to forget that. Okay. So let's go through the steps. So we were informed of something, and let's say for the sake of this, that we had to evacuate. We pre-thought out our plan. We've made our plan. And part of that plan also means that we need to let somebody know. I know in the fires, unfortunate fires that we've had in, Sonoma County over the years, and also in Lake County, it was a big thing of those people that had to leave. I know, especially up in Paradise, a lot of them went to Chico or up to Redding or south. And we, if you had somebody in Paradise that you wanted to know whether or not they made it out, you had to go to the Red Cross, and the Red Cross was keeping this list. But it's important to let someone know out of the area that you're okay, that you're evacuating, and if you know where you're going to evacuate to go there. Okay. So that at least that one person, quite often it's a relative, and you could ask them to notify other people, and quickly give them their phone numbers or prearrange that. Just to tell a quick story, my wife went over, she's British, and so she was going over to spend a little time in England before she went back up to Scotland to visit family. And her mom and brother came over a few days later. They were still in London, and they had signed up to take a dinner cruise on the Thames. And so I was watching TV, watching the news, the phone rang, and it was an aunt in Scotland who called to let me know that the boat that they were taking for that dinner cruise sank in the Thames. And I'm going, okay. But she also told me that they had a change of plans and they didn't go. So, but it took that person away from them to let me know. The same thing happened at the time. I'm retired from PG&E, and I was in San Francisco when Loma Prieta hit. At that actual time, I was in the Embarcadero BART station. But I was able, through communications, to contact my family. We had lived in Benicia at that time, and they were fine. They barely felt the earthquake at all. To let them know that I was okay and I would be home sometime. Because since I took BART to work, I didn't know how I was going to get home, but I knew I'd be safe and get home sometime. And my wife told me that she already had a call, happened to be that same aunt in Scotland, Aunt Millie, who called because what was relayed to them, they actually thought that like San Francisco had fallen into the ocean. And, it was kind of interesting how things go. But again, here's that out of area communication that's so vitally important when we have to evacuate, that we let somebody know. So then we've got a communication plan. And now we're ready to think about what types of things personally that maybe we want to put together, either when we are, let's say we have an earthquake, power's out, we're stuck in our home, the home is safe, we're safe. Roads may not necessarily be passable. I am myself kind of figure that this humongous overcrossing monument, that 680 overcrossing, I think it may be on the ground. I don't know. But it also in CERT got us thinking of if we had people that we needed to take to a hospital, how can we get to a hospital without having to cross over or under a freeway? Something to think about. You know,
Gordon, can I
yeah.
make a, because that made me think of something, going back to your previous comments on communication, just quickly. One thing we have in our neighborhood is a phone list of 25 people. And with that happened, we sent out an alert to our group because we know who needs extra care. A couple of Alzheimer's patients on the street, for example, and who needs extra help. And so it's good to have a neighborhood alert if you can manage to do that.
That's a great idea, great suggestion.
Mhm.
Great suggestion. And in a major earthquake, we don't know if phones will be working or cell phones. Better chance of cell phone working than a regular phone. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's talk about what we need to put in our kit or what we need to do if we are going to basically shelter in place in our home. Some of those things, obviously, the first thing is water. You know, your water may work, may not. If you had a broken water main, there's a couple things that you need to think about. And that's that break could drain water away from your house, or it still could be partially, if it was cracked, under pressure. But because it's cracked, could bring contaminants into your house. So if you have something like that you're worried about, what we recommend, first of all, is to shut the water off going into your house. Okay. And if you can't really do that, at least shut the water. There's a valve where water comes in to your water heater, because your water heater is the largest supply of clean drinking water you have in your house. 40, 50 gallons, something like that. So you may want to do that so that you keep that. The second in your house, the second largest supply of water is in the back of your toilet tank. Okay, as icky as that sounds, it's still palatable water. So you need water, or you can buy water. And what we suggest as a minimum is a gallon per day per person. But you think about that gallon is possibly, if you still have electricity and you're going to cook, you're going to need water for cooking, but it's also for sanitation, right? For washing, drinking. So as we say, as a minimum, a gallon a day per person. And if you have any pets, you're going to need water for them as well. Okay, so we're water, let's get to food. So we all have a lot of stuff. Canned foods have usually a 1 to 2 year date. You know, you want to put together enough food items for, as we say, as a minimum of 3 to 5 days. Okay. There are items, you know, you can think of, okay, pasta is not going to go bad, doesn't need to be refrigerated, right? But you need water to cook it. Peanut butter is a great thing, high in protein, doesn't require refrigeration. as a student at Chico State, there were times I lived on peanut butter and crackers for a day when mom and dad's money ran out towards the end of the month. But there are those things, you may have frozen vegetables, frozen meat, those types of things. In your freezer, if you're not constantly opening it, you're going to be good for at least 24 hours. And then something's going to have to thaw before it goes bad. If you have things in your refrigerator, if you're not opening it a lot, you're still going to be good for a while. So you will have, food items, but we think that it's best to think about having items that you have stored. Now, where to store them? Some people will store them in one of these garbage cans that's on rollers, so they can move it around, take it out. There's a lot of different ways to store it, but if your house is damaged, you're going to still want to store those items in some place that you might be able to get to. So we're going to have food, right? You're going to have to think about that. If you're leaving, right, you may want to, if you put together like a quick grab and go bag, you may want to have some granola bars and a couple bottles of water in there. Something like that, just to give you some nourishment. We can last a few days without eating, but it really gets tough when it comes to water. We really need water. We're dependent upon that. So take a look at it. We're putting together our home kit. So you want drinking water, we want some food, 3 to 5 days. You want to make sure that you have first aid supplies readily available. Maybe moist towelettes. A lot of these little prepackaged things that we have to clean our glasses, primarily alcohol. So that's also another way of cleansing our hands or something like that. If we're going to be stuck in our house, we have an earthquake, we always recommend that people have a whistle. Okay. So we could hear that as people walk about. CERT members will be going through their neighborhoods and checking. They'll be pounding on doors, saying if people are okay, if they need help. Sometimes your voice, when you cry out for help, may not necessarily be as loud as if you blow a whistle. Okay, so we always recommend a whistle. Flashlights, if power's out, you're going to want flashlights, extra batteries. Okay, we'd recommend, if you could, turn your gas off. PG&E's website has at pge.com. You can go and find out how to turn your gas off. It's just a matter of, there's a valve before the gas meter that's in line with the pipe. And all you have to do is to turn it quarter turn. So, excuse me, it's across the pipe and that shuts it off. Now, I'll warn you, it's not an easy turn. My house in Pleasant Hill was built in 1963. That gas valve had never moved. So it's going to be a little tough to move. We recommend a crescent wrench, at least 12 inches in length. But that's one of the things that maybe, if you've got a neighbor available to help you with that, please do so. And you're only going to turn the gas off if, one, you smell gas, okay, or two, you hear the hissing, okay. Otherwise, don't turn it off, because once you turn it off, and I had to tell people after Loma Prieta, I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't get home, so I went to the San Francisco division office and went on the phones talking to people. A lot of them asked, should I turn my gas off? Do you smell gas? No. Do you hear any hissing? No. Then don't turn it off, because I can't guarantee when it would get turned back on. And in the city of San Francisco, most of the gas got turned on by San Diego Gas and Electric. Okay, so it was a period of time. Even the building I was in, 123 Mission, it took over a week before I could go back in that building because they have to go floor by floor checking out for leaks and things like that. So I guess basically I had a week's vacation, but anyhow, it was a sad vacation. So if you want to turn the gas off, fire extinguisher, if you have one, you know, we recommend that people have a fire extinguisher. And because you never know when a little fire may start, you know. What we train in CERT, if it's any bigger than a garbage can, you're not going to put it out. Because a typical, I should have grabbed one, a typical household fire extinguisher is only going to last 10 to 12 seconds and it's gone. So it's going to be empty. So fire extinguisher, you've got the whistle. Those, you know, are the types of things that we would want you to have together. Food, things for safety. If you're staying in your house, I know especially in the wintertime, if the heat's off, your house is going to get cold really quick. So I would recommend that you make sure you have ample blankets and stuff like that. Okay, so let's say, boy, I'm talking to see him. Got about 20 minutes left here. So let's say you have to leave. You know, so now we're taking a look at not only a home kit, but what are we going to put in our cars? And there's a lot of that, the same thing. You know, you're going to want, as I call it, a go bag, something to put in there, but you're going to want clothes, you want personal papers. And we recommend, and I'm going to give you the Pleasant Hill CERT website at the end, but from there, there's also instructions on how to create a survival flash drive to where you could scan your important documents and have it just on one of those little flash drives, thumb drives, and you can take that with you. Okay. So if you're going, you know, we have those things that we talked about, but you want to make sure you bring medication, have ample supply, glasses. If you have cell phone, please don't forget your charger like I did. Luckily, my wife didn't. So, and we have the same iPhone. So I was able to charge actually from my car, but it was one of those things you run out the door and there are things you're going to forget. So think about that stuff in advance.
And Gordon, I had to help my neighbor open her garage. I know it seems like a small thing, but not everybody knows how to open the garage when there's no electricity. So be sure in advance you know that.
So that's a great thing to bring up. So if you have an electric garage door opener and you're out of power and you need to open your garage to get your car out because you want to leave, there is generally a rope or a cord that hangs down, may have a handle on it. And what you need to do is to pull that down. Sometimes it's a little tough pull and it releases that locking mechanism that has moved the door open and closed. And then you need to manually lift that door up. Either swing it up or if it rolls up, it'll go up. And that's how you can get it open. Did you have much trouble, Gail, opening the door?
I didn't, for some reason, I've known I lived alone for so many years. I knew how to do it, but my neighbor didn't have a clue. And it was actually very easy to show her. And it doesn't take a huge amount of strength. Sometimes a little awkward, but it's just something that not everybody knows, and that's when our neighborhood, and if I'd had trouble, I've got amazing neighbors that would have kicked in and helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
So CERT's website, which I'll give you in a minute, it has a listing of like home kits, what items and suggestions for those. How about pet kits? You know, we want to leave. In our case, my son took his dog, put it in the back of his pickup shell. But what about a pet kit? You know, so if you're going to be leaving and bringing your pet with you, you have to consider some things, you know, not only just food and water, maybe a favorite toy, blanket or something for the to lay on that was familiar with. But most importantly, if in fact you need to go to a Red Cross shelter, okay, and most likely in Pleasant Hill, those that would be opened would either be the new community center or the senior center as a shelter. So Pleasant Hill Rec and Park is responsible when called upon for opening shelters. And the reason I mentioned those two, because they also have cooking facilities if they're available. Okay. But a Red Cross shelter will not allow your pet in. So if you have, let's say, a cat and you're able to corral it after an earthquake, and if you have a pet carrier to put it in, that is what's recommended. Even if you need to take it over to the county, over on, was that Blum Road, I believe it's on, you know, to for it to be over there. But yeah, the animals are not allowed in the shelter. So you have to make some arrangements for that. So there's pet kits, there's our home kit, there's a car kit to think about at that website. Creating a survival flash drive. All of those things are on the Pleasant Hill CERT website. And as well as a go bag and some items to put in a go bag. So the last thing I want to mention before I give you that website is disaster psychology, something we don't necessarily think about. But whenever we have some kind of major disaster, it's going to affect us. It's going to affect us because we may be a survivor of that, or it's going to affect us because maybe we lost a neighbor, a family member, a friend. You know, there's not only the possible loss to life that'll affect us. We may be injured, maybe just a broken arm or something like that, but it's going to have some effect on us because we were a survivor, even though we had a broken arm, of an earthquake or fire. You know, thinking back of Paradise, the Napa and Sonoma counties, it affects us even when we are not personally involved in that particular disaster. With the Coffee Park fire up in Santa Rosa, the day before that fire, for 15 years, I volunteered and served on the board of directors for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And we were having a walk up in Santa Rosa, and we were at Howard Park. And so I was tabling at that event. And the table next to me was a psychologist from the San Francisco VA that also spent 2 days in San Francisco and 3 days up at the VA clinic in Santa Rosa. Good friend, I've known him for years. Come to find out that he lived in Coffee Park. So the very next day, he had lost his house. Family, wife and 2 kids, they were all okay. They got out. Luckily, he had an apartment in San Francisco because he worked at the VA hospital in San Francisco 2 days a week. So they had a place to go to. But, you know, I just thought about that. One of the fellows that worked for me lived in Coffee Park and commuted into San Francisco, lost his house completely. So, you know, there are those things that are going to affect us, even though personally, you know, we weren't injured. So there's that psychology of it. And what I want to recommend to everybody is don't keep those thoughts in to yourself inside. You know, it's great to talk about, you know, talking to people, having them listen and you listen to them is a great way of sharing, lessening the burden of some loss like that. So Gail, did you have something you wanted to say? I know you were highlighted. Okay. So I just want to bring that up, that there could be a psychological effect. You may know somebody personally that was affected, even though you weren't. And just keep an eye on them. Take a look. You know, their physiological and their psychological impact of that disaster could be there. So lastly, the Pleasant Hills CERT website, where you can get a lot of information. It's pretty easy. All together, like one giant word, Pleasant Hill CERT, CERT. No separation, just pleasanthillscert.org. Will take you to the website, and there's a banner that goes across the top, and one of those things you can click on says disaster preparedness, and that's where you can get the information on all these kits, on creating a survival flash drive, find out more about CERT. What drew me to CERT itself was the fact that I've always been raised to give back to the community. And with CERT, there's a job for everybody. You know, there are those that'll be out going door to door in different zones doing search and rescue. There will be those that will be doing some moderate first aid. There will be those people that can be part of a phone tree, or those people that are signing people in, you know, as they come to. So what attracted me was there was a job for everybody, regardless of skill level. And, you know, unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we had to cancel class. We were hoping to have something going again this spring. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. But who knows, possibly in the fall, we could have another program, or maybe it'll be next spring. I don't know, but the CERT class, it usually is in the evening from 6 to 9 or 9:30. And we cover 8 particular disciplines, but you'll learn actually how to put out a fire with a fire extinguisher. We have a couple nights of basic first aid, splinting, bandaging, burns, that type of thing. We do hazmat, terrorist situations, disaster psychology, and just a whole lot of things over a period of time. And you walk away with a backpack, hard hat, some gloves, and a few things is complimentary, thanks to the county and the state of California. And you'll also be sworn in as a state disaster service worker. Primarily, that means that you're covered under state workman's comp should you get hurt, really is the big plus there. But that's it. I'll enter any questions anybody has. Yes.
Okay, I just have a few comments. And because I live in Sonoma County, I personally knew a lot of people who lost their homes in the Sonoma County fires. That was very, very sad. But But I wanted to add, because I'm chairman of our local emergency preparedness committee, please look at your homes. Also, not just things that you have, large things that you have above your refrigerator and cupboards, but also think of pictures that might fall, and you can get earthquake proof picture hangers that have an additional little hook underneath them so they will not come off the wall, because if those break, then you're going to have glass on your floor. Another thing is large furniture. If you have pieces of large furniture, they can be attached to the wall. So when the earthquake is moving things, those won't fall over. As far as your food, you know, Gordon mentioned that you could keep things in your freezer for a while. What we're advising people to do is fill large jugs with drinking water, large, like gallon-sized jugs, and put it in your freezer. And that will make your freezer an old-fashioned ice box. And those things will stay frozen. We had to evacuate. And when I came back, other people were having to throw everything out in their freezer. I had jugs of frozen water, which kept my food frozen, and I didn't have to throw things away. And then speaking of food, in your go bags, we've found that a nice lightweight food high in protein is organic seaweed. And you might not like the taste of it, but it's an excellent source of protein, and it's very, very light. So you don't have to carry, you know, a jar of peanut butter is going to be very heavy if you're trying to carry something. And I think that's about all, except that after our evacuation, a lot of the people here, because I live in a 200 resident senior center, a lot of people were very traumatized by having to leave their homes. So we offered classes in what's called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, the tapping technique. And that helped people hugely after the evacuation to get calm again. So that's something you might want to consider.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're absolutely right. I didn't think about, even though I've used it in the past, the frozen water is something my son and daughter-in-law camp a lot. So when we had one of these shutoffs from PG&E, is we had solar power, because when they go camping, they bring their portable solar cells. So we're able to keep a lot of things going from just from a solar standpoint. But don't be misled, because I've got 27 solar panels on my roof. And when we were out, we were out. So a lot of people think, well, I've got solar, so I'll be okay. But that's not true. So if you have the portable solar. So I want to thank you, first of all, for inviting me to speak. And secondly, for all of you who attended.
Hey, Gordon, there's a question in the group chat for thoughts on getting more evacuation info for unincorporated, like Lafayette zip codes.
So what we have done, I'm sorry, Holly, I just looked at your picture. So for those that live in the Lafayette unincorporated area, that borders Pleasant Hill, you know, they can attend Pleasant Hill CERT. You know, they have to be addressed some way. So if you're a county resident that lives adjacent to Pleasant Hill, certainly, you know, we would take you in, as well as I'm sure La Miranda CERT, the Lafayette, Moraga, Miranda CERT. But for the county, the way we look at it is if they're in that area, they're welcome. Welcome to join us. So anyhow, thank you all.
Thank you,
I
Gordon.
hope it was worthwhile. And let's keep our fingers crossed
Right.
that we won't have any floods from all this rain, that they're saying possibly up to 5 feet of snow up in the Sierras by the end of the week. I'll take that. And I wish you all well and stay safe